Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to all who attended our 2020 Environment and Energy Conference earlier today. Since we didn't have enough time for my legislative update, I wanted to go ahead and make sure that I got that information out to you for those of you that are interested in what has happened at the Tennessee General Assembly over the last 9 months or so in terms of environment and energy legislation. So first up, I want to mention a couple of bills that we saw this year dealing with air. So Senate Bill 1633 and House Bill 1675 by Senator Yeager and Representative Kiesling has to do with implementation of the Affordable Clean Energy Rule. So what this bill would have done is requires the department to implement the federal Affordable Clean Energy Rule and submit the plan to the administrator of the EPA by June 15th, 2020. We did see an amendment to this bill to extend that date to November 1st, 2020. And the fiscal note attached would have decreased revenue to the general fund by $300,000. So this bill did not progress all the way through the process. And the legislation, or excuse me, the Clean Energy Rule, Affordable Clean Energy Rule, was finalized by EPA in June of 2020. And it gave the states 3 years to submit a plan to reduce carbon dioxide emissions of coal-fired EGUs using heat rate improvement technology. And so by federal law, the department has the 3 years to submit their plan. The General Assembly, or excuse me, well, at least the sponsors of this bill wanted to bump that up. But like I said, this bill did not end up making it all the way through the legislative process this year. Another air-related bill that we saw was Senate Bill 2081 by Senator Hale, House Bill 2340 by Representative Lamberth. And this replaces members of the Air Pollution Control Board. So it vacates the existing board on July 1st, 2020, and replaces the members and removes the governor's ability to appoint 12 members and reduces it to 4, and would have allowed the Speaker of the House and Senate to each appoint 4 as well. This also did not make any progress this year, but I wanted to mention it just to kind of highlight why this came about. So this bill came about kind of in response, well, directly in response to the board's vote to delay approval of this state implementation plan revisions that would have eliminated the inspection and maintenance or emissions testing in Tennessee. The division presented the package to the board, and after reviewing it, the board decided that they wanted to see several more years worth of data to be able to ensure that if they remove inspection and maintenance in Tennessee, that it wouldn't come back onto the stationary sources on down the road to kind of offset those emissions. So the General Assembly wasn't thrilled with this, and so this bill was filed. Fortunately, they didn't move this bill because a month or so later, the division came back with the data requested, and the board approved the package and sent it on its way to EPA, where it sits today waiting approval. And as Michelle mentioned in her presentation earlier, we should see a decision from EPA within the next fiscal year. Another air-related item is that in the governor's original budget, there was a $3 million non-Title V appropriation. Because of everything that happened with COVID and all the budget cuts that we saw across the state, that appropriation was cut to 1.5 million. So the hope is that it will come back in future years, preferably sooner rather than later, but they did only see 1.5 of that original $3 million appropriation. In the arena of water, there were a few bills that were filed. The first was Senate Bill 2219 by Senator Sutherland and House Bill 2636 by Representative Holt, dealing with in lieu fees for compensatory mitigation. And this bill was a caption bill, but amended to prohibit a sponsor of an in lieu fee instrument for compensatory mitigation from accepting in lieu fee payments in the state unless the sponsor's in lieu fee instrument requires the sponsor, as to both new and previously sold in lieu fee credits, to agree that the department may bring enforcement action if the sponsor fails to complete certain developments in the appropriate time. This bill deals with the current credits that are sitting in the Tennessee Stream Mitigation Program. But I believe, as Bill and Steve, our subcommittee chairman, mentioned earlier today, that bill also was not able to make it all the way through the process due to the limited scope of legislation that the General Assembly that the Senate put in place when they came back in June. Senate Bill 2224 by Senator Sutherland and House Bill 2206 by Representative Zachary has to do with requirements for state operating permits. And this was a caption bill that was amended to prohibit TDEC from requiring any permit, inspection or review or approval of plans for the construction, installation, or modification of any land application systems. So this bill was seeking to distinguish between the engineer and regulator roles, and I think that this bill was mentioned earlier as well. So Senate Bill 1911, Senator Powers, and House Bill 1965, Representative Reedy. This one actually did become law, and they were able to pass this bill through before the recess in March and became Public Chapter 589. Deals with compensatory mitigation for NRCS projects, and the department did work with the sponsors on this bill. And what it does is it was a bill that was amended to no longer require compensatory mitigation in association with watershed activities that are conducted in accordance with a site-specific design developed through full application of certain NRCS standards and subject to NRCS oversight as a federal action. So a couple of months ago, the division did have a permit out for public notice and comment that goes along with this legislation. So a couple of highlights for solid waste. Senate Bill 2521 and House Bill 2793 deals with recovered materials processing facilities. And I failed to put the sponsors on here, but this was Senator Briggs and Representative Gloria Johnson from Knoxville. It would have required the recovered materials processing facilities, or RUMPUFs as we like to call them, to be regulated as solid waste disposal facilities. And this was filed in response to a fire at Fort Loudon Waste and Recycling. And when I spoke to TDEC about this back during session, when this bill was kind of starting to move through the committees, the information I received was that, they went out and looked at this site and they really didn't find any environmental violations. It appeared to be more TOSHA violations. And so I don't know that this bill really would have accomplished what the sponsors really intended it to. But the unintended consequence is that this would have undone some legislation that was passed in 2019 for electrolysis and pyrolysis facilities. That this was a bill that the ACC had, that the chamber worked with them on, and it would have it is in the law currently that these pyrolysis facilities, gasification and pyrolysis, excuse me, that's the word I was looking for. Gasification and pyrolysis facilities are to be regulated as RUMPUFs, which are much less stringent standards than the solid waste disposal facilities. So we were able to work with the sponsors to get this bill sent to TASER, which is the Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations. So far this year, since session, I've only seen them come out with one report, and it was on community resiliency. So I don't know whether TASER will choose to take up the subject as a report, but if they do actually do a study on this, I will be sure to keep you all up to date on that. Senate Bill 2131 and House Bill 2369, the prohibition of single-use bags. Wes from the ACC did mention this, as well as the previous bill on RUMPUFs in his update earlier today. And this bill would have prohibited grocery stores, retail stores, and food service businesses from providing free paper or plastic bags to customers. There was an amendment put on this bill in the Senate committee to exclude paper bags from the prohibition. Ultimately, this bill was sent to summer study, and we have not heard anything at this point about there actually being a summer study on this. They may have actually intended to have one when they made that decision in committee, but this was before COVID and before kind of other things kind of came to the priority forefront. And And then there is Senate Bill 811 and House Bill 855, which did become Public Chapter 712. This was a chamber bill dealing with urban soils, and it clarifies that soil intended for reuse as soil is not a discarded material constituting waste. We were very fortunate this year to be able to get this bill passed. It had gotten pretty much through the Senate, except for the floor vote prior to the recess, and was making headway through the House committee as well. But then COVID hit and the General Assembly took a recess. So when they came back in June, we were able to explain to the Senate leadership that this bill was time sensitive because the department had put together a working group to come up with a regulatory framework on this subject. And so it was really essential for businesses that this bill be passed. And so they did pass this bill. And then the House, because their scope was not as limited, did also move this through. So we were able to get this bill passed this year. And as Scott mentioned in his update earlier this afternoon, several chamber members and myself are on that working group working on that regulatory framework to go along with that bill. And we are pretty happy with the direction that it's headed, and we'll continue to work with that group, and hopefully we'll be in a good place there. A couple of other bills that don't quite fit into one bucket or another. Senate Bill 1934, House Bill 1838 became Public Chapter 591 and has to do with connection or reconnection of a utility. This bill prohibits a political subdivision of the state from adopting an ordinance, resolution, regulation, code, or policy that prohibits the connection or reconnection of a utility service based upon the type or source of energy to be delivered to an individual customer. And this bill was filed in response to natural gas bans that are popping up in California and other states. And so Tennessee wanted to get out ahead of this and to go ahead and pass this bill prohibiting such a ban. Senate Bill 2264 and House Bill 2084 has to do with products containing asbestos, and it prohibits the sale, offer of sale, manufacture, or distribution of a product containing asbestos, and authorizes the Department of Environment and Conservation to enforce compliance. This bill did not make it through the legislative process. It was put on notice in the House. The sponsor did make a presentation to the committee explaining how important this issue is to him and to his constituents, and kind of made a stance that he will continue to work on this issue, but did not want to move the bill forward at this time. This bill, there are some unintended consequences of passing a bill like this. Some industries, such as the chlorine industry, does use and rely on products that are asbestos. And so we'll probably continue to see bills like that. Wes from the ACC did mention that they see bills like this popping up across all of the states. So just a couple of updates on elections. I'll be very brief on these, but just kind of wanted to give a general overview about some movement that we're going to be seeing. In the House, you have Andy Holt in the upper left there from Dresden. You have Jim Coley from Shelby County, Martin Daniel and Bill Dunn from Knox, and up in Johnson and part of Sullivan and Carter is Timothy Hill in District 3 there. These are all open house seats. They're all Republicans. They're all experienced. So we'll see new members taking those seats. Also in the House, since we're past the primary now, we did see several incumbent defeats. And you will see Representative Rick Tillis in District 92 there, Marshall County, part of Franklin, Lincoln, and Marion. On the far right side of the screen there, you see Matthew Hill, District 7, part of Washington County, and in the very upper corner there, Micah Van Huss, District 6, which is part of Washington County as well. All three of them are Republicans and experienced. You'll see in Knox County, Representative Rick Staples, District 15, and so those four were defeated in their primary races, and so we'll see new members in those seats as well. In the Senate, not much movement at all. The retirement of Senator Dolores Gresham. She is District 26, which is Chester, Decatur, Fayette, Hardeman, Hardin, Haywood, McNairy, and Henderson counties. She's stepping down, retiring from the Senate, and so that seat will be open. She also has served as the Senate Education Committee chair for many years, and so she will leave quite the void to be filled there. Paige Wally is the primary winner for that seat, and I believe he is unopposed, and so will be taking that seat. He is a clinical psychologist. He also previously served in the House of Representatives from 1990 to 2000. He is also a former DCS commissioner. So just a little bit of movement with that one seat in the Senate. So to close, I just want to touch on what 2021 session is kind of starting to look like. There are still a lot of questions, obviously, with the state of COVID changing constantly. We don't exactly know what it'll look like, but what we know so far is that 2021 restrictions are likely to be in place for 2021, barring any significant improvement with COVID. And the two chambers will continue to follow the state and local restrictions, recommendations on distancing, cleanliness, etc. At this point, they're unclear if days on the Hill will be permitted, but they are taking reservations for the 8th floor and will allow its use in the event that the restrictions change. Cordell Hall remains by appointment only, so that'll be different than our normal protocol, but this is what we experienced back in June and August as well. There has been no discussion by the speakers of a change or additional limits to the number or scope of bills that may be introduced. The session is expected to last a typical period of time, and there will be no official announcements or final decisions expected until after the caucus elections in December. So that's what we know now from legislative leadership. Obviously, any of that can change with the ever-changing situation, but that's what we know at this point. But we will be ready to represent the business community in whatever form that it looks like this year. We'll be ready to do that. So we look forward to working with everybody on this next legislative session. If you have questions about any of the bills I mentioned or any bills that I didn't mention that you want information about, please contact me. I think most of you know how to get a hold of me, but I'm happy to talk by phone or by email or assist in any way possible. So thank you all so much. Thanks to those who joined the conference today, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. I can't figure out how to turn it off. Okay, there we go.